So you guys, I hope that you are strapped to your chairs because this speaker is going to blow you away, okay? Get excited for David Bereit. All right, he is the founder and former CEO of 40 Days for Life. Who has heard of 40 Days for Life? Everyone in this room! Yes, exactly. So, he is the founder and former CEO of 40 Days for Life, the global movement, which he led through its first decade and built into the world's largest coordinated grassroots pro-life initiative, mobilizing 2,000 leaders and 750,000 volunteers in 675 cities across all 50 states and 40 nations, saving 14,000 lives, closing 83 abortion centers, and helping 143 workers to leave the abortion industry. What? That's incredible. Oh my gosh. And I mean, I was a part of a 40 Days for Life campaign. I'm sure everyone in this room has been involved in a 40 Days for Life campaign. Talk about influence and impact. So over the course of his career, David has spoken to more than 1,000 groups, inspiring 1 million plus people in 600 cities, 50 states, and 20 countries. His insights have been featured in nearly every major media outlet, including CNN, ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox News, HBO, NPR, BBC, The New York Times, The Washington Post, and USA Today. So today, what David does is he runs a strategic consulting firm where he advises influential organizations and trains coaches and mentors leaders to live up to their God-given potential and achieve greater impact, which is what you're all here to do this weekend. So yes, exactly. He has served on numerous prestigious boards and raised more than $75 million for faith-based pro-life causes. Give it up, everybody, for David Bereit. Woo!
So my wife and I, this afternoon, decided to go for a little walk. We go out of the hotel, we go up to Connecticut Avenue, we turn right. We get down a little ways, we go wandering around, and then we say, yeah, we got to get back to the hotel. So we're coming across this big, long, high bridge, and there was this insane group of young people with the audacity. Get this. This group of young people had the audacity to think that they are going to abolish abortion. Can you believe that? So, I just have one question. Who is the pro-life generation? Who is the pro-life generation? And this time I want to make sure they hear this in the White House, in the Capitol, in the Supreme Court. Who is the pro-life generation? Oh, yeah! Woo! Oh, my goodness. Do you know how much the CEO of Planned Parenthood is quaking in their boots right now? I remember the day that I quit my job in the pharmaceutical industry to go jump in full-time into the pro-life movement, and my board chair, the former head of counterintelligence in the CIA, but he was the board chair of our little pro-life group, he said, Planned Parenthood doesn't know what a bad day they just had. And that's how they feel when you leave this national leadership collective. They don't know what a bad day they just had because you are going to go home and abolish abortion in your generation. I believe that. And let me bring it down a level to say, we need you to do that. It's not just, let's get excited, let's go do it. We've got a crisis in our land. In 1973, 7 men imposed abortion on the United States of America just a few miles from where we are sitting here tonight at the Supreme Court of the United States. 65 million children have perished since that time. If you're a person of faith, you know these are children that were made in the image, the likeness of God Almighty, knit together in a mother's womb. They lost their lives under this banner of choice. But they're not the only victims. Millions of women have been wounded. Some have died. Many more have been scarred physically and emotionally and spiritually. And then men, you've been pushed to the sidelines. You're told, it's not your body, it's not your choice. I don't know if you've ever noticed, but the majority of abortionists are men. And the 7 people who imposed abortion on America on the Supreme Court were men. But yet we're told, stay out of it. Families are torn apart. Our culture devalues human life. And then we look at the industry that is perpetrating this violence against women and children. Planned Parenthood, all the independent abortion centers, a multi-billion-dollar a year industrial complex that preys upon vulnerable women in a time of need and profits from the death of their children. And then you look at all the forces that are arrayed against you. The government, the federal government, many aspects of it, many state governments. Then you look at the media. Is the secular media a friend to the pro-life movement very often? No way. What about Hollywood? Entertainment, celebrities, pop culture? No. Okay, at least, we look at the media and we look at the courts. Courts, right? Most of the courts? Oh no, they're not friends of the pro-life movement in most places. When you look at the crisis we are facing, you realize this is truly a David versus Goliath situation. But for those of us who've read the story, we remember who wins. David defeats Goliath. And that's what you need to realize. But because of the scope of this problem, what I want you to recognize is if we as a pro-life movement keep doing what we've always done, 45 years later, we're going to keep getting what we've always gotten. Are we happy with the fact that 1 million children die a year? Are we happy that 1 million women are wounded a year? Are we happy with occasional victories? Are we happy that once in a while a celebrity might say something that sounds kind of pro-life and we all spread it across social media? Is that enough? No way. We can't have small thinking, we can't have small activities, and we cannot have small results. The magnitude of this crisis demands more. So what my hope is, through not only this presentation, but also for the rest of this leadership collective, and then when you leave here, is that you will think bigger than you've ever thought before. And that you will take bigger actions than you've ever taken before. And they will achieve bigger results than ever before. And my hope for you is that your efforts, your pro-life efforts, I want them to proliferate. Proliferate. Now, irony is not lost. The first part of the word proliferate. The dictionary definition of proliferate, I looked it up. Proliferate is to rapidly increase in number and spread, to multiply. How many of you would like to see your pro-life efforts rapidly spread in number and multiply, right? Yeah. But guess what? For that to happen, to meet this crisis, it's bigger than just you. And you can't do it on your own. So what I'm going to do during our time together is take you through 3 phases of leadership that will help you proliferate your efforts so that they will multiply and spread. And as I take you through these 3 efforts, I think you're going to understand something that maybe you kind of saw, but now you're going to get it. And I'm going to give you some frameworks that I think will absolutely exponentially increase the results of your pro-life efforts. But here's what happens with most of us. If we look at this as our impact, the lives that are saved, and then we look down here, this is the time that passes. When we get started, I don't know about you, when I got started in the pro-life movement, I knew nothing. I didn't know how to articulate the pro-life message. I didn't know how to recruit people. I didn't know how to door knock. I didn't know how to run a nonprofit. I knew none of that. So when we get started, our impact is down here at moment 0, right? So what do? We come to Students for Life activities. We go to the summit. You watch trainings online. You meet with your regional coordinator. And over time, you start, to see some impact in your efforts. Maybe you start recruiting people. Maybe you start getting people who are changing your mind. Maybe you go out and sidewalk advocate and you see a mind changed. You see a life saved. But as you get going, there's a problem. There's only so much you can do. If you took everything you know from this weekend and you go home and you put it into action 24 hours a day yourself, you're going to go and then you're going to level out. Because there's only so much that you, by yourself, can do. Does that make sense? Let's say you're the best sidewalk counselor on the planet. You can only be out there so many hours. You can only interact with so many mothers. You can only save so many lives. Let's say you're the best pro-life speaker in the world and you're traveling around and you speak to different audiences and you're making an impact, but there's only so many days, so many audiences, so many talks you can give. There's only so much you can do. And when we look at the scope of the problem, you realize that's not sufficient. So what is the next phase? The next phase, this is what I call the start phase. The next phase is the grow phase. Because you realize you've got to get started and we're going to work through that. But then you say, how do I grow beyond what I can do? Well, what happens is you recruit somebody else and they get involved and they level off. You recruit somebody else, they level off. You recruit somebody else and they're getting involved. And what you see is you see consistent growth. And this happens because you are leading others. But that's an important next phase. For some of you, you may be right here, and that's great. It's a wonderful place. We all start here. As you get better at what you do, then you realize, I can't do it all on my own. I've got to recruit other people. And when you start recruiting other people to be involved in your Pro-Life Future chapter, in your Students for Life group, in your pro-life endeavors, your local community, your pregnancy center, over time, as you keep doing that, your efforts will grow. That's where most leaders stop. I would argue that the most impactful, the most influential way you can save the maximum number of lives is if instead you look at this as a need to multiply. And the way you do that is not just you doing activities, and it's not just you leading others. You multiply when you lead leaders. That's the breakthrough. Because what happens then is your effort goes up like that. Now, when you think about the children at risk right now, when you think about the women at risk right now, is this enough? Is this enough? Or do we need to see our efforts proliferate and spread and multiply so they can achieve maximum impact? That's where we need to go. So I'm going to walk you through each of these, but first I want to just give you an example of what that looks like. When I got started in the pro-life movement, it was just me. And I had to figure out what was my calling, what was my mission, what was my purpose. And I'm going to walk you through that as a first framework. But then when I realized I can't do it all, there were things that I couldn't do well, there were things that I needed other people's help with, then I led a local group in College Station, Texas, a local pro-life group, and we started recruiting people, and we started to grow. But then when we did our first ever local 40 Days for Life campaign, it was back in the fall of 2004, we got so excited, we recruited more than 2,000 people to be involved in that local campaign, and we were leading others in doing that campaign. We saw abortions drop by 28% in our town. Over 100 lives were saved because it wasn't just any one person. We were leading others to get involved. But then, when we realized our little community was only one of hundreds of locations where women were being wounded and children were dying, we said, what if we took this and instead of us just leading others, what if instead we focused on recruiting leaders and helping those leaders succeed so they could recruit others? And that's when 40 Days for Life went from one town to 89 towns to 150 towns to 600 towns, and had 750,000 volunteers, and the numbers that Kate said when she was coming up here. In this time, it was because we put the emphasis on proliferation by leading others. Leading leaders, not just leading others. Does this make sense? Okay? I'm going to walk you through the steps of this now because I really want you to grasp what this can mean to you. The other thing I want to share is when you develop your pro-life efforts in a way that doesn't depend just on you, it doesn't depend on you leading others, but it has leaders leading leaders, that effort can live far beyond you. When you graduate from your campus, when you leave your community and your pro-life future chapter is without you, don't you want that effort to continue to succeed? well, then you have to develop leaders for that to happen. And that's the way you will multiply those efforts. I stepped away from 40 Days for Life nearly 5 years ago, and still it continues to proliferate. Why? Because we never made it dependent on one person, one personality. We never made it dependent on one charismatic leader who would lead others. Instead, we developed leaders who developed leaders who developed leaders, and it continued to spread. And the latest numbers they're reporting is today, 18,885 lives that have been saved, 221 workers that have had conversions, 112 abortion facilities, and it continues to spread. We couldn't stop it today if we tried. Don't you want your pro-life efforts to proliferate like that? So let's go through each of these 3 phases. I'm going to give you a framework for each. I'll give you some practical, real examples, and then I'm going to relate all of this at the end to you and what you need to do when you go back home. Does that sound good? Are you ready for this? Do you have your pen and paper ready? Because this is going to get pretty intense. Okay. So, I said there were 3 phases. Who remembers the first phase? Start. So let's put start right up here. And do you remember who's involved in the start phase? You. What I found is that you need to answer 6 questions to know exactly what you are supposed to be doing. If you ever took a class in journalism, they were the questions that every news story is supposed to report. Today, I don't know that they do that as much as they used to. But those questions, although we're going to do them in a different order, and I'm going to go through these, are why, what, how, who, where, and when. You're saying this is a profound framework? It is. How many of you have ever seen the Simon Sinek video called How Leaders Inspire Action? Anybody ever seen it as a TEDx talk? Write that down. Simon, S-I-N-E-K, Simon Sinek, How Great Leaders Inspire Action. The premise that he makes in this 20-minute TEDx talk is that before you can tell somebody what you do and how to do it and what you want them to do, you've got to reach them on the level of why. Why are you doing what you're doing? Why would they do what you want them to do? We have to begin our pro-life efforts with why. I want you to just think to yourself, and later I want you to actually go through and answer these questions on paper. Why are you here? Why did you get involved in the pro-life movement? You could be doing a lot of other things this weekend. Was it just because you got a free trip to D.C.? Was it just because you get some bagged lunches every day over and over again? I think there was something more to it. You're here because you feel you're supposed to do something. You're here because you know there's a great injustice that you're supposed to help solve, right? Yeah! I don't know whether it's because somebody in your family was affected by abortion. I don't know if it's because you heard a story from a post-abortive woman. I don't know if it's because you watched somebody walk out after an abortion at an abortion facility and you saw that person so empty and lost and just hurt. I don't know if it's because maybe you yourself went through the pain of an abortion. I don't know what it is, but there's something in your gut that says, I've got to be involved in this movement. And that's where you have to begin, and that's where you begin to lead yourself so you can lead others. And you need to let people know why you are involved. The next question that you need to answer, this is the order I'd recommend them, is what? What is it that you, through your pro-life efforts, are trying to accomplish? What is the outcome? Now, this is really hard for those of us who haven't done it before. But what is it that you would say, at the end of the day, if we achieve this, we've achieved victory? What is the outcome? It's going to be different for different people. I'm going to give you real-life examples of one scenario of this. But you've got to know what it is that you want to achieve, because that's point B, you're at point A, and you've got to go from point A to point B, right? But you've got to know. If you get in your car and you pull out your iPhone or your Android device and you pull up Google Maps and you want to go on a trip, what is the first thing that Google Maps asks you to enter in? Your destination. What are you trying to get to? Because once it knows your destination, it knows where you are, scary, and then it will track the route of getting you there, right? So you've got to know what you're trying to achieve, what is the outcome. And then, just like that GPS, how am I going to get there? If I'm right now at this place, I want to get there, that's what I want to achieve, how am I going to do it? I know why I want to do it, how am I going to get there? That may be a project, that may be a program, that may be a campaign, that may be something that Students for Life, Pro-Life Future encourage you to do, but you've got to know, how am I going to achieve this? Now, you may say, I don't really know. Well, try things. And if some things work, keep doing them. If they don't, stop doing them and do something else. But you've got to figure out, how are we going to get to what it is we're trying to achieve because of what's at stake, my why. Okay? Then, who? As you're trying to lead yourself and you're saying, here's why I'm involved, here's what I know I'm supposed to achieve, here's how I'm going to do it, I can't do it on my own, who do you need to help you do it? You don't need everybody, but you need somebody. So who are the people that you need to bring in? You're not leading them yet, but you need to know who's going to be involved in your efforts. Whether it's at a pregnancy center, whether it's post-abortion healing, whether it's political endeavors, whatever it is, you've got to know who it is that's part of getting you from where you are to where you want to be so you can accomplish what you need to accomplish. So the who is vital, and that's going to really play into our next step when we go into the grow stage. Where? Where are you going to focus your efforts? Is it going to be on your campus? Is it going to be in your neighborhood? Is it going to be citywide? Is it going to be a statewide endeavor? Is it going to be national or international? You've got to figure that out, because you've got to know who I need to work with and where I need to engage them so I can get them to do the things that will help us to achieve the results because of what's at stake. You've got to figure out where. And that may be a really simple question. Maybe for you right now, it's right where you are. It's grow where you're planted. That's fine. But make sure you get clear on that, because sometimes we're wandering all over the place trying to do everything instead of getting very clear on where to start. This is your identifying your mission. This is your roadmap to achieving enormous life-saving impact. And the last question is when? You may say, right now, we've got to do it. That's fine. That may be the answer to your question. Or maybe it's something that happens within a certain time of the school year, or a certain time in your community, or maybe like the March for Life. When does it happen? Around January 22nd every year. That's their when. I've worked their team through this whole strategy process. They're very focused on that for the national effort, and then they pick a date in each of the state capitals as they're expanding, and they focus on the when. So you've got to answer those questions, because what you're going to get at the end of this, you're going to have a plan. You don't know necessarily whether it's the right plan, but you've got a plan to get you started. And I think that's what's most important, is just knowing where you start. So my homework assignment for you, if you're willing to accept this Mission Impossible assignment, before you leave the National Leaders Collective, answer these 6 questions. Answer them. Write them down. You will have far greater likelihood of succeeding in your efforts if you answer these 6 questions in writing in a piece of paper. Not in a little notepad on your phone, not on a computer, handwritten, paper, commit. So first answer them. Then guess what? Act on them. When you go back home, you're going to have to take action. Because if all this is a plan and the plan never gets put into action, nothing happens. For you to get started, you've got to have the plan, and then you've got to act. So first you answer, then you act, and then the last step is adjust. Because as you start acting on this yourself, remember what we're doing here. We're getting you started. We're getting you up to here so you can maximize your own personal life-saving impact. And so you want to get there as quickly as you can. So as you start moving, you're going to find, yeah, that didn't work so well. Be big enough to say, let me do something different. Let me do something different. But keep working through those 6 questions. This is your plan for success. When I was starting 40 Days for Life, let me tell you the exact answers that I thought through myself before I ever asked another person to be involved. Why? Why did I want to do this crazy thing? Because children were dying in my community. Women were being hurt in my community. It was happening in my backyard, and I knew one day I was going to be accountable to God for my action or inaction. That's why. So what did we do? We said, we've got to end abortion in our community. We've got to close the local abortion center peacefully and prayerfully. What we need to achieve, when are we going to pop the cork on the champagne bottle? It's when Planned Parenthood's sign gets pulled down and we know no more children will die there, no more women will cry there ever again. That's what we're working towards. How do we do that? Thank you so much for giving me a moment to drink some water. Woo! How are we going to do that? Well, it's our why. Children are dying, women are being wounded in our community. What are we going to do? We're going to end abortion. We're going to save lives in our community, close down the Planned Parenthood. How are we going to do that? We're going to do it through a 40-day campaign of prayer and fasting, peaceful vigil, and community outreach. That was our how. That was the entire strategic plan of activities for 40 Days for Life, and it still is today. From the first campaign in 2004, 17 years later, same three hows. Same what? Same why. Who? In our case, because it was a faith-based effort, we realized it's going to be people of faith that we're going to specifically target. We're not trying to, in this case, win over atheists. We're not trying to win over pro-choice people. We're trying to mobilize Christians. That was our goal. Local Christians who are concerned about children dying and women being wounded, and they're willing to do something about it. We know there's a lot of people not willing to do something, but there are some who will. So that was our who. Where? It was in our local community. And even as it began to spread, it was giving people the tools to save lives right where they live. We were talking about this with the pro-life future leaders today. Did you realize that not a single abortion has ever been performed at the White House down the road from us? Not an abortion has ever been performed at the Supreme Court. Not one. No abortions have ever been done in the U.S. Capitol or in your state house. They happen where you live, in your town, in your city. And so our where was giving people the ability to make a difference right where they were. And the when, for us, it was a 40-day campaign to draw everybody together and bring the pro-life community together for a 40-day period. That was our when. Do you understand how simple but yet how powerful this is? That's where you start. That's where you get your roadmap and you know, how am I going to maximize my efforts? But then, what's the next step after start? Who remembers? Grow. And what do you have to do to grow? Who does that involve? Man, somebody's been listening good. Okay, so next is grow, and that happens from you leading others. All right, so you want to grow from you flattened out, you've kind of got your plan, you're in action, you go back home, you're answering the questions, you're taking action, you're adjusting it, and then you say, I need other people. Well, you remember in this step one of start, you had to answer the who question. Now you got to go and find those who people. And what it looks like. This was a game changer for me. Are you impressed with my drawing skills? Thank you. I'm married to an elementary school teacher, my beautiful bride, Margaret, and you're going, man, he married a girl that beautiful? How did he pull that off? Woo! Wave your hand, Margaret, just so everybody can see how pretty you really are. Almost 29 years of marriage, and I love that woman more today than the day we said I do. Guys and girls, I hope you can say that one day about your spouse. It's incredible. Anyway, when I started getting involved in pro-life efforts, and even as I was trying to plan out the growth of 40 Days for Life from just one plan to actually recruiting people, I realized there were 3 steps that we needed to take. And those 3 steps were first, attract. Secondly was connect. And the third step was direct. So let me explain. We can't do this all on our own, so we need to attract people into our efforts, right? So we got to find ways to draw people in. You've got this great plan you just developed in the start phase. Now you've got to start attracting people into that, and we'll walk you through the steps of that. But then once you attract them and they say, yeah, that sounds great, before they usually do anything, they've got to know, like, and trust you. Believe it or not, most people are not, the first time you ask them, going to do the crazy things you're going to ask them to do. You've got to connect with them. You've got to build a relationship. You've got to get to the point where they know that you care about them, they care about you, and they realize we can do something great together. And then, after you've attracted people, after you've connected with them, then you can direct them to do the things that will advance this mission that you identified in the first phase. You can give them calls to action to take steps. So what you do, though, the reason this is a circle instead of just a straight line, it actually looks more like a spiral staircase. Because when you attract some people, they start saying, yeah, that's interesting, like, let me get involved, let me come join your club, let me be a part of your pro-life future chapter. You build a relationship with them, maybe you have coffee together, maybe you share with them some different sidewalk advocacy techniques, maybe you get to know them, you're working at a pregnancy center and you're getting to know the clients there. Over time, once you form that relationship, you give them some things to do as a leader, right? You're leading them to do something to move from point A to point B. And those things that they do are going to produce results. So more people are going to say, hey, what is she doing? What's he doing? I want to be involved in that. That will attract more people. That will help you have more people to connect with, more people to direct. When I was starting 40 Days for Life, I started with a list of about 200 pro-life people I knew. I sent them an email, and I invited them to a conference call because we didn't even have Zoom back then. We didn't have webinars or webcasts or any of these other things. I sent an email to these people. 96 of them showed up on my telephone conference line because that was the maximum I could hold. And from those 96 people, I told them all about this big plan. I told them the why, the what, the how. I invited them to be a part of it. Some of them got excited. They started spreading the word to other people. We started building relationships with them. Some of them chose to lead a local 40 Days for Life campaign. They attracted more people, connect more people, direct more people, and it started to spiral. Do you understand how that starts to go? So for me, for the first 5 years of 40 Days for Life, I had these 3 lines on a little piece of paper on my desk in front of me because every day I had to ask, did I do something today to attract somebody to our efforts? Did I get in front of somebody new and invite them in? If not, I can do better tomorrow. Did I today connect with somebody who's involved with our efforts? Did I make a personal phone call? Did I go out and stand with them on the sidewalk and pray together? Did I go and help them with the diaper drive? Did I get to build a relationship with somebody today? If I did, great. If I didn't, tomorrow I can do better. And then the third step was, did I today give people an action that they could take? Did I direct them to take an action that would advance the mission that they and I care about to create the results that we want to create? If you every single day ask these questions of yourself, am I attracting, am I connecting, am I directing, it will make a huge difference. Let me very quickly walk through, and I could give a whole hour just on this because it's so powerful. But the attract part, the first thing is it has to be the right person. You have to get in front of somebody who actually fits the who you were talking about. In my case, if I was trying to recruit people for a 40 Days for Life, if I got in front of somebody who was a pro-choice atheist, how likely do you think that they would be attracted to what we were doing? Not at all. I just accepted that. So who did I go to? I went to Christians in our local community who were concerned about abortion, and I got in front of them. Once I got in front of the right people, then I had to have the right message. That's why what you're learning here about how to communicate your pro-life convictions is so important, because you've got to connect with them, the head, the heart. Maybe it's telling your why story. Maybe it's sharing with them what they can do, how they can be a part of the solution. But once you're in front of the right person, you've got to have the right message that connects with them, and then you've got to have the right invite. How do you actually ask them to get involved? Because if you tell a beautiful story to the right person, they go, that's wonderful, and they walk out and they do nothing different, you've wasted your time and theirs. You've got to have something you're asking them to come into. Maybe it's to join your club. Maybe it's to volunteer at the pregnancy center. Maybe it's to go door knocking with you. You're taking a step to invite them in. You are attracting people in to your pro-life efforts. For you to lead others, you have to have the right person, the right message, the right invite. Okay, connect. First, you have to pick your channels. What do I mean by that? You can't be everywhere, connecting with everyone on every single platform that exists to man today. I'm not on TikTok. I'm just confessing it here publicly. I just don't yet get it. Maybe one day I will be. I don't get on every single platform. Maybe you are. But you've got to pick the channels. Where is your right person? And then connect with them there. If they're not on whatever platform, then go somewhere where they are. And that's where you can build the relationship. When I was starting 40 Days for Life, I realized, what do most Christians who care about abortion, how can I connect with them? And I chose 3 channels. I chose email, because most people then and now still have an email address. I chose originally teleconferences because I could get anybody on a phone regardless of where they were, and eventually that became online events. And the third channel was going and seeing them face to face. I traveled to more than 600 cities because that was one of our channels. I wanted to be with people. I wanted to hug them. I wanted to love on them. How do you build a relationship? It's with people. But those were the 3. We didn't have much of a social media presence. We didn't do a whole lot of other things that other people were doing, but we knew where our people were. We could deliver the right messages, and we could build relationships with them. But when you own those channels, build a relationship, and that's the second part. It's build a 2-way relationship. You're not just pushing information out. You're actually looking and saying, I see you as a precious child of God. I see you as a person with innate worth and dignity. And I want to get to know you. I want to know about you. I want to know what makes you tick. What's your why? What do you want to accomplish? How can we do it together? When I chose those 3 channels, was it hard sometimes traveling to 600 cities? Yes. I didn't get much sleep. My kids and my wife, I put them through a whole lot. My kids have been to 45 states and 20 countries. That's a lot. But you know what? I knew that to serve these people, I need to go and love on them and be with them. With email, the first year and a half of 40 Days for Life, I answered every single email that came in. When it got to nearly 1,000 incoming messages a day, I finally hired somebody to delegate that to. And you say, you're insane. Yes, but you know what? I needed to get to know those people. If I was going to ask them to do something crazy, like go out and pray outside of an abortion clinic, and they're sending me an email from Sydney, Australia, or from Hoboken, New Jersey, I better be on the other end encouraging them and loving on them. And when we got people together on a conference call, we poured ourselves into them. So you've got to build a relationship. And then the final step of connect is be consistent. Are you a fair weather friend, or are you there for people when it gets hard? If you're building a relationship, when somebody goes out to sidewalk counsel the first time and they fail, are you there for them? Do they just get an email from you when you want money, or when you want them to do something, or do they hear from you when you care about them? Maybe they're sick, they're in the hospital. Are you consistent? Are you there? We have to be real people for other real people. As a leader, these steps are so important to connecting. The people that you attract, if you reach them where they are, if you build a relationship, if you're consistent and you are steady and with them, they will be fiercely loyal and they will jump over tall buildings with a single bound. But first, you've got to build that relationship. And then direct. You're calling people, call to action. All we're doing, if we want to move the ball from A to B, we've got to take action steps, right? And you can act, but you can only reach so far, and then you level out. You've got to call them to action. And you've got to make sure that that action is tied to the mission. If you are telling them we're going to end abortion in our community, then what you're asking them to do better be something that directly contributes to that, right? It seems to make sense. But I see pro-life groups advertising all kinds of things that I'm going, how does that have anything to do with pro-life? But it's just because somebody asked them to send out an ad for something or do this or do that. In my mind, there's a sacred trust here. If I'm going to ask you to take action, it better achieve results and it better accelerate the mission that we're in this together. And the last piece on direct is the 80-20 rule, or in the case of directing, I actually think it's more of the 90-10. What does that mean? They say that 20% of the efforts get 80% of your results. Have you ever heard that rule before? They say that in business. They say that in organizations. 20% of your leaders will achieve 80% of your results. Well, in my case, the way I am viewing this here is, of all that I'm doing and talking and communicating with the people that you lead, because you're leading others, I want 80% of it to be not asking for something. I want it to encourage, I want it to inspire, I want to cast a vision, I want to be there, I want to build the relationship, and less than 20 or less percent of the time am I actually asking them for something. Maybe one time it's, I'm going to ask you to write a letter to the editor, and I'm going to tell you how. Maybe the next time it's going to be, I'm going to ask you to join me going door knocking. And then another time you're going to ask them for money to contribute towards a donation to the local pregnancy center. But if that's all you ever do is just ask, people are going to be like, whoa, that's too much. You've got to break it up over time. But just make sure that when you call people to action, it's something that accelerates the mission. Do it about 10 to 20% of the time. And also make sure that those actions that they take will also help to feed this wheel and keep growing. Do you understand here why literally just focusing on these three things, once you have the answer to your 6 questions and you're acting on them and you're adjusting them, and then you're focusing on these 3 things, I literally grew a local community effort from about 250 people to 5,000 people doing just these 3 things. That's it. Every day I was like, how do I attract more people? How do I connect with more people? How do I direct more people? How do I attract, connect, direct? And it just started to spiral, that spiral staircase going up. But you're not there yet. We have one final phase. Who remembers what it is? Multiply. All right. So are you ready for this? This is going to look a little bit complicated, but this is the level of leadership that is why Students for Life and donors to Students for Life invested in you being here. You're not here by accident. You're here because they wanted to invest not in followers. They want to invest in leaders, and not just leaders who can lead others, but leaders who can lead leaders. Let me show you what I mean. Multiply. And who's involved in multiply? You leading, what was the last part? You leading leaders. You led others in grow. In multiply, you're leading leaders. That's where you go, not just in a straight line. That's where you have that exponential growth curve. That's where you go from one city doing a 40 Days for Life to 675 cities doing 40 Days for Life, hundreds of thousands of volunteers. Literally, this is the step that differentiates it. Okay, it may take me a minute to draw this here, but I think it'll be worth it. All right, I'm going to keep up here our little piece that we just did. Whoops, my drawing is not as good as it was. All right, Margaret, you're going to have to teach me how to draw this better when I'm trying to do it at an angle. All right, so this is still our 3-part attract, connect, direct. Okay, that is at the top of a funnel. All right. Thank you. When Students for Life started implementing this process, their growth went from strong to off the charts. It's been amazing. This was instrumental to 40 Days for Life's growth. If you get this, and again, some of this you may be like, I'm nowhere near at this point yet. That's okay. Keep this. After you go through the start phase, then you go through the growth phase, get ready for this. This is when things get really exciting. This is when the abortion industry starts putting their facilities up for sale. This is when it gets exciting. Okay, so first, I'm going to just write the words in here and then I'll explain this. Concerned, active, leader, and 100x. What do I mean by this? You, to lead leaders, need to find people and develop them as leaders. You're not going to, in most cases, find somebody who is a born leader. They've got all these great skills. They come into your group and they just are on fire and they do great things. You may get 1 or 2 of those. I've seen a few. But most of the time, you know what you're going to get? People who are going, huh? What am I doing? Wait, I'm scared. I don't want to do this. And you nudge them along step by step. As you're attracting people, you're drawing them into a funnel. As you connect with them, you're moving them further down this funnel. And as you direct them, they are taking steps that are proactively moving them along in this process, and they don't even know it. You are developing leaders, and they don't know. Because if you told them right up front, hey, I want you to be an amazing leader. If somebody had said that to me, I would have run for the hills. I didn't think I was a leader. But if you instead help people to move from concerned to active to leader to 100x, that's where you see the exponential growth. All right, let me explain what I mean by this. You are in this cause because you're in some way, shape, or fashion concerned about the crisis of abortion, right? That's why you're here. I don't know, again, what the exact reason is. But you started off, whether it was maybe you heard a talk, you heard Kristen Hawkins give an amazing talk, or Stephanie Gray Connors, or Lila Rose, or maybe you heard a post-abortive woman share her story, or maybe you saw a video of life in the womb and then realized children are dying, or maybe your parents told you about a family member who's affected. Something made you concerned. But you didn't stop there, because at some point, you began to differentiate. The vast majority of pro-life people in America stop at concerned. Oh, that's so sad. Oh, that's so bad. And they do nothing about it. Look at the polling data. How many people are pro-life? Roughly half the population is pro-life in some way, shape, or fashion. Why aren't they here? It's because they're just concerned. Our job is to get them off of concerned. The first and most important step is to take that concern and turn it into action, to get people active. So as you are attracting people, you're getting in front of the concerned people. As you connect with them, as you direct them, you are trying to take them from stopped, parked, into motion. Because once you get that inertia going, it's easier and easier to keep that motion going, right? So you are trying to move them from concerned to active. Everything you do is that. Will every concerned person you ever get in front of in your pro-life efforts get active? No. You only need some. Then you essentially have the same circle. As you attract people to take action, as you connect with those who are actually doing something, whether it's on the sidewalk or whether it's door knocking or whether it's whatever activity you're involved in, as you're directing them to take steps, guess what? A smaller subset of those people will be a leader. They will start doing things to lead others. Maybe you delegate a task to them that, hey, you need to put on this diaper campaign. And they recruit a little team and they start leading people. They don't even know they're a leader, but you've encouraged them to take their action and start leading others. So you're always in your group. You're not just trying to get a bunch of active people, because then you're a leader who just leads others. And guess what? That's a really tiring job. It means you can never take time off if everything depends upon you. It also means you can never expand the impact beyond your 24-hour day. You need leaders. And so everything you do is of those people who are active, you're finding the fewer who are leaders, who are doing things that set themselves apart from everybody else, and you see them influencing others. You'll know if somebody's a leader if people are following them. That's as simple as it gets. But of those who you find, as you're attracting, as you're connecting, as you're directing, it's kind of like a washing machine. It's spinning around. You have more people coming in the top who are concerned. Some of those are active. Some of those are leaders. You're down at the bottom. You're going to find a few polished diamonds. I don't have a better word for this than I just put 100Xers. These are people who can have 100-fold result. Do you remember, if you're a Christian, you read the story, the gospel story about the sower and the seed, and they were planting seed, and some of it fell on the path and got trampled, and some of it fell among the weeds and got choked out. But some of the seed fell on fertile soil, and it multiplied in producing 30, 60, 100-fold. Some of the seed that you plant way up here, as they come down, will produce 100-fold impact. And when that happens, your efforts will explode. That may only be, in my time in 40 Days for Life, with 2,000 plus local leaders, right? We had 750,000 people who were active. Our message got out in front of millions of people over the years. 2,000 leaders. I can count on two hands the number of people who fit that category that I interacted with in 10 years. You're not needing a bunch, you're needing a few. But let me begin to wrap this up by sharing a story of how that happened, and then I want you to think of how all of this applies to you. One of those who got involved, he was a guy in England. He saw a video of me giving a talk in Florida at an event, and it was recorded. What he didn't know is the event was a dismal flop. There were only about 15 people. There were supposed to be thousands of people at this event. My family traveled to Florida to go to this event, and there were 15 people there. But you know what? I gave a great talk, and I set up my video camera. I'm like, if there's only 15 people here, I'm going to at least get it out to a few more people. I sent it out. Unbeknownst to me, a guy in England sees the video of that talk, and he was concerned because where he was in London, there were abortion facilities, and children were dying. Women were being hurt, and he was a Christian. And he said, I need to do something about it. So he started to try to find out what he could do to get involved. He started to volunteer with some of the local pro-life groups, and eventually he realized that's not enough. He said, I need to do a 40 Days for Life campaign in London, right in the heart of the city. And so he was actually living in the outskirts. He moved into the city, and just in an apartment, and he ran a campaign right in the heart of the city. People literally dumped fertilizer on him and his prayer volunteers. They spit on them as they were out there praying outside of the facility. But Robert led. And then more campaigns started happening across England. Then they started spreading across Europe. Then they started to spread, because London's such an international city, to Africa and to other places. One of the places that Robert, as a leader, he was planting seeds all over Europe. There was a guy in Zagreb, Croatia, named Ante. Ante was a school teacher. And Ante said, children are dying in my city at the hospital from abortion, and I'm concerned. Women are being wounded. And so he said, I need to get active. And he started to learn about pro-life activities. He started to do some of the things. And then he said, I need to lead. And so Ante reached out to Robert and said, Robert, can you help me lead a 40 Days for Life in the capital city of Croatia? Robert helped him to set up a campaign. They ran it in Zagreb. Hundreds of people participated. One of the abortionists quit during their campaign. They know of 4 lives that were saved during those 40 days. And at the end, Ante said, it's not enough for me to lead others. I need to lead leaders. So Ante reached out to other people across this little bitty Balkan country of Croatia, and he found 6 people in other cities. The next time there were 6 campaigns, then there were 10, then there were 15. When our family went, there were 20 40 Days for Life campaigns going on all across Croatia. And I got a call and heard about this leader who was leading leaders, and it was all because this leader who was leading leaders in England. And so we flew over to Croatia, and when we arrived in Zagreb, and they were telling us about 40 dana za život. That's 40 Days for Life in Croatian, in case you didn't know that. You probably did. And we meet Ante. And we start going around, and we're praying with his people, and we're going to these different campaigns in Split and Dubrovnik. And then one day, Ante says, I'm going to take you to the farthest city away from where we are. We're going to go to Vukovar. I said, what's Vukovar? And he said, it's right on the Danube River across from Serbia. And it was the city that was the hardest hit during the war that broke up Yugoslavia, that created these different nation states. And so we went over to Vukovar. And when we went there, I met a leader that Ante had recruited, because Ante was leading leaders. Her name was Lydia. And Lydia was mobilizing hundreds of people in her community. Most of them didn't speak a word of English. Everything we're doing was through translators. And when we get there, we go out to the hospital where they're doing the vigil outside. And when we get out there, these people are praying. Over 100 people around the perimeter of the hospital. It was a beautiful sight to see with their signs in Croatian. And then afterwards, Lydia and Ante said, we need to go to a meeting. And we need to go to a meeting right now. It's a planning meeting. Don't worry about it. I said, oh, okay, whatever. They got me in the car. We drove over, and we pull up in front of a little bitty house. It's probably just a little bit bigger than this platform I'm standing on right now. A tiny little house. And we walk into the house, and we're greeted by a woman in a bathrobe. I don't know about you, that doesn't seem like a planning meeting. Something's a little off here. She doesn't speak any English, but through a translator, she shared with me, they were actually surprising me, she shared with me why she was there meeting with me. Months earlier, she had been pregnant. She was in an abusive relationship. She was terrified. She had to get away from the guy. She felt she had no other option. She went to the local hospital to have an abortion, and there were people praying outside because of Robert in London, because of Ante in Zagreb, because of Lydia in Vukovar, leaders leading leaders. And she said, when I got there, those people who were out there said, I'll help you. And she said they offered me money, they offered me housing, they helped me get away from my abusive relationship, they helped me with medical care, everything I needed. She said they were there with me when I chose not to have the abortion. They were there with me through the pregnancy and through the translator. She said they were there 2 weeks ago when I gave birth to my daughter. And she said, would you like to meet her? And I said, yes, I would. And a woman came in from the other room with this little perfect baby girl named Petra in her arms. And she laid her in my arms. She was wiggling around, and she then dozed off while I was holding her. But I'm looking at this perfect child who was that close to dying. And I realized, what if I'd stopped just doing what I could do? What if I just said, that's all I can do. I can just do the start phase. What if I just led a few others in my community, and that was it? What if I'd stopped there? But instead, by leading leaders to lead leaders, that effort proliferated and spread thousands of miles from where I lived to where people didn't even speak the same language. And I'm meeting a child who was scheduled to die, who was saved because of leaders leading leaders leading leaders. And that moment for me was worth everything. Yes, we can go build wonderful pro-life organizations. Yes, you'll get people applauding you and saying you're doing great things. But don't be in this because you want to be a hero. Be in this because you want to be a hero maker. Help others be heroes. And when you do this, when you decide to go from start to grow to multiply, when you say, I'm going to answer these questions, David, even if I think I've done it before, I'm going to take it seriously. I'm going to answer them. Then I'm going to, what was the second step? Act. And then I'm going to adjust as needed. You do your 6 steps. You are on a mission. You start the car moving. But then you say, okay, I can't do it all on my own. I've got to grow. I've got to lead others. And you start attracting people. You start connecting, you start directing, and you start that spiral staircase going. And then, the ultimate level of leadership, when you are constantly focusing on moving people from concern to active to leader to those handful who have that exponential impact, that's when you will be a part of leading the change that needs to happen to end abortion in this generation. Can you do this? Yes, you can do it. Is it easy? No. But is it worth it? It's worth it, and you can do it. So I'll stop here if there are any questions. I just wanted to download a whole lot to you. If you got questions, to dial this in. That's what I'm here to try to help with. And then I'm also here afterwards if we want to talk any further. So with that. Do we have time for a few questions, Mary? I may have abused the time a little more than we have time for a few questions, Kate?
All right, so yeah, put your questions in the chat. I know we're all kind of like mesmerized. Everyone was like, oh my gosh, what just happened? So David, we have a question that says, any suggestions for introverts for recruiting others?
Great question. I'm an introvert by nature. I am. I have had to work to come out of my shell for years. My wife, when she first met me, I was kind of kept to myself. I remember we went to a party together. She was the life of the party, and I was just standing on the side. And while she's dancing, she hands me her earrings to hold because she was having too much fun, didn't want to lose them. There's hope for us introverts. There really is. The reason I tell you that is not to say you've got to come out of your shell and you've got to grow. I mean, yes, in a way, you do. If you're going to lead, you have to do that. But if you actually study a lot of great leaders, Abraham Lincoln was largely introverted. A lot of great leaders were introverted. But they realized there was something important enough that they were willing to step some out of their comfort zone, some out of their shell. The other thing is to recognize you've got to play to your strengths and then find others and play to their strengths. Does everybody need to be up on a stage in the pro-life movement? Nope. There are people who build unbelievable websites. There are people who are able to do things on social media I can't even fathom. As I said, I don't know how to TikTok. But you may be able to do that. Maybe you're an introvert, but you can do that in front of a camera. Your 60-second whatever you do on TikTok. I'm just saying, everybody has a place. And that's why it's important when we go through those questions, you've got to say, what's my why? That will either, A, help you to grow and overcome some of your introversion. That's what I've had to do. And or you could say the what I'm supposed to do doesn't necessarily mean that I have to get up in front of people and be energetic. But you could still reach, influence others. Are there people who are able to lead leaders that themselves are not in the limelight? Absolutely. In fact, sometimes some of the most powerful leaders of our movement, you may not ever know their names because they're behind the scenes, mentoring, helping, encouraging, developing others. They may say, I don't have the gifts that you have, but I can help you bring those gifts out. I can help you to recognize how to apply those gifts, and I can encourage you so you can go do the things that I can't do. But introverts have a significant role in this movement, and we're going to have a club meeting, a therapy session afterwards, Introverts Unite. I'll be part of that club. All right, another question. Any other questions?
Yes, I have another question. This one's getting a lot of action in the chat. Did you ever have doubts / have to remind yourself why you were fighting this fight?
Yes. All the time. This is some of the toughest work that a human being can do because you are combating pure evil. You are dealing with death. You're dealing with people who have been wounded, and it's really tough. We've had times, I had one time where I learned that a whole bunch of snipers had their rifles trained on me because the Planned Parenthood facility had told them that I was a threatening person. We were doing a prayer vigil outside of an event, and there were multiple snipers on the roof the whole time. They had their scopes on me. My wife has had her life threatened. There have been times where we've tried to reach somebody going to an abortion center and we failed, and they've gone through with the abortion. I remember I was in Dayton, Ohio. There's a wonderful pregnancy center across the street from the late-term abortion facility run by Warren Hearn, late-term abortionist. And we went into the pregnancy center with Elizabeth Koob, the director there, and Debbie Nieport, who worked with her. And they took me upstairs where they have a little chapel that's overlooking a window of this late-term abortion center. They said we go in here to pray. And I looked on the wall of the chapel, and there were all these ultrasound photos of babies. And I smiled, and I said, oh, are these the ones that you've been able to save? And they said, no. These are the ones who came to us. We were able to show them their child in the womb, show them the ultrasound, and they chose to go across the street and have the abortion anyway. And we realize we're the only people who will ever memorialize these children. This is hard. But the important thing is when you're reminded, whether it's a child that you meet, like I met Petra in Croatia. In all my time in 40 Days for Life, traveling to hundreds of cities, I met a grand total of 8 children that were saved. Thousands were saved that I heard stories of and saw pictures of, but I met 8. And those 8, every time was a time when I really needed it. Because I really just was at wit's end and just saying, can I keep going? And then you meet a child, or you meet a mother who just says, thank you. Because of you, I don't have the pain of regret that my friend who had an abortion went through. Or maybe I had one time, I was speaking at a church just when I was trying to get our local efforts going in College Station, St. Joseph Catholic Church. And I get up in front of the congregation. I'm nervous. I give a horrible presentation. I'm just trying to tell people, tell them, here's why we're doing it. Here's what we're going to do. What do we want? How do we want you to do it? We want you to come out and pray at the local abortion facility. I did terrible. I think 3 people signed up. There were hundreds of people in the congregation. I thought it was a failure. And then later I found out there was a young girl in that room, in that church, who was pregnant, scheduled for an abortion that next week at Planned Parenthood. And because she saw people in her church at least willing to do something to help mothers who are pregnant and children at risk, she changed her mind, chose life, went to one of those 3 volunteers and said, I need help. That child today is, who knows, 15, 18 years old, I don't even know. But those are the kind of things that remind you. So that's why. Why do I say start with why? It's because if you don't have that, you're going to burn out fast. I've seen it a lot. But if you have your why dialed in, you'll be able to keep going. I keep 2 photos on my desk. The last answer is this. I keep 2 photos on my desk. One is the first child that I met, saved through a 40 Days for Life campaign in Harrisburg, Virginia. His name is Jakai. I can tell you the story another time. And the other is a young woman in her 20s. I met her mother in Massachusetts, and her daughter was killed during an abortion. Her 20-something daughter was pregnant, went to an abortionist, and died on the surgeon's table during the abortion. And she gave me that photo and said, never forget what's at stake. It's not just the babies. Those 2 photos are still to this day on my desk. Whenever it gets tough, I look at those photos and I say, okay, I can do more. So find your why and make sure you keep it in front of you, and that will help you to press through.
That was a great question. Thank you. We have 2 more. 2 more. David is also going to be staying overnight, so he will be available for conversation.
Party in our room, Margaret? Are we having a party?
We'll do this one, and then we'll do another one, and then we'll wrap it up. But if you could give any advice to your past self before you started 40 Days for Life, what would you say?
I would say 2 things. Second in importance is exactly what I share with you tonight. If I had known this earlier and didn't have to figure it all out, it could have gone faster, bigger, and had a greater impact. As much as you may go, yeah, he's drawing pictures on a board, this is profoundly impactful. If I'd known this earlier, more lives would have been saved. But that's second in importance to number 1. I would have trusted God more. This is a spiritual battle, and I know this is not a religious organization, but I think most of us are here because we're people of faith and because we realize that every life is more than just worthy in a worldly sense, but sacred and precious in God's eyes. Our efforts will flourish when we are right within God's will. This to me is a discernment process, and if you're a person of faith, not just answer these questions, pray through them, and then trust God. The things that He has asked me to do, I would never have believed I could do, but I trusted Him most of the time. I just wished I'd trusted Him more. So trust God, number 1, and then number 2, do the exact things we've gone through tonight. You will be a highly impactful leader that will help to bring an end to this atrocity for once and for all. Last question.
Last question. What advice would you give to someone who's struggling to find their place or a specific role within the pro-life movement?
Okay. Great question. Well, first I'd ask why, then what, then how. While I'm being somewhat facetious, that's the process I'd go through. I mean, there's a lot of young leaders that I've met, Students for Life involvees at different campuses, local young people with 40 Days for Life, and they'll ask me that question. And I'll usually just start asking them just conversationally. So, well, why do you care about this? Why would you do this instead of mastering knitting? Why? And then they tell you. And you dig into their story and you figure out what it is that motivates them. And then what is it that you'd like to see happen? And usually people have some inclination of what outcome they'd like to see. In my wife's case, Margaret's place is very different than mine was. Although she was very involved with 40 Days for Life, Margaret now works at a maternity ministry in our town, and she is a mentor to these moms who are homeless, pregnant, and Mary's Shelter brings them in and loves on them. And my wife's role is to be a cheerleader for the mothers and the children and to teach them the life skills they never had so that they can thrive. And it's beautiful, but it's messy. It's really messy. That is not me. I would do terrible in that. I have no patience for that. Margaret is able to just love people through the mess. So different people are going to find different places within this. So the what, the how, the who, the where, the when, all these are important questions. The second aspect of this I would suggest is look around at what's already happening. So if there's already a Students for Life group on your campus, and you're here because you're involved, well, get more involved. Try some new things. If you are graduating, well, either join or start a Pro-Life Future chapter. Or if there's a pregnancy center, go and volunteer a few days. Don't commit to anything long-term. Maybe there's a 40 Days for Life. Go out and pray. Maybe it's sidewalk advocacy. Maybe there's a post-abortion healing. Go and dip your toes into a number of areas and just see where you feel most at peace. And if nothing that you do feels right, guess what? Start something. We need innovators. We talked about that with the pro-life future leaders earlier today. We need you to do new things. The biggest breakthroughs, the pro-life movement, have not happened yet, and you can make them happen. Don't let people with gray hair tell you that, oh, that'll never work. You just go prove them wrong and go do it. So look at what's going on, try some different things. If one of those things, dive into it, and then grow yourself, lead others, lead leaders. And if nothing fits, then do what I did. Go start something new. And then watch it thrive and watch what God can do with that. And then I got to a point where I said, I think I've done what I can do here. Let me hand it off to the next generation so I can go on and encourage and help other people. So find your place, but it will change over time. But answer those questions, dip your toes into things, and if needed, start something. So with that, I have just one final question for you. Who is the pro-life generation?
We are the pro-life generation!
I thought I heard some. Wait, let me ask again. Who is the pro-life generation?
We are the pro-life generation!
This time, I don't only want the White House and Supreme Court and the Capitol. I want Gavin Newsom over in California to hear you. Who is the pro-life generation?
We are the pro-life generation!
Yes! Go abolish abortion!